Hello to everybody.
Thank you, Kelly. It's nice to see you. I'd like to welcome all of you. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. And our guest today is Jenny. Jenny, say your last name for me.
Filush-Glaze.
All right. See, I was going to say Filush, so that would have been incorrect. And Jenny is joining us from Auburn, Alabama,
Oh
where I
my.
understand it's chilly as well as where we're
Ooh,
sitting.
some good weather coming towards you.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what we're seeing. We're preparing already.
Good.
oh goodness. Um, and let's see, Jenny is came into my orbit through my sister Marilyn, who also lived and worked in Auburn. Jenny was reminding me the other day that they were actually in the same building for a while. My sister was the executive director of um, AIDS Eastern Alabama. I'm not saying the right name.
Yeah, Unity
Um,
Wellness. Yeah, that's what it was at the time.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, and Jenny is familiar with my sister's extended family. It's just really great that Marilyn brought Jenny to my attention. So I totally immerse myself in her book. And Jenny, remind me the compilation of your stories in the newspaper is called Grief.
It's called Grief Talks.
Grief
Um,
Talks.
yeah, and it is. It's weekly grief columns from two different newspapers that ran for about 6 years.
Wow.
It's really wonderful. Nadine, I'll send you a link. And
Thank you.
her most recent book um, has to deal with alpha gal syndrome grief. Um, and
Mm.
Jenny will um, give us the scoop on that in a little bit more details. But I also just drank that one is in as well as she used the framework for grief, and she will explain that as we move on. And it was there was so much I could relate to, even though um, I I may not have alpha-gal syndrome, which is a tick-borne disease that's pretty awful and life-changing and transforming. And it was just incredibly helpful. I found I was earmarking and taking notes for the work that I do in my hospice care work, as well as my end-of-life doula work and my teaching, in different courses. So I'm eternally grateful to Jenny. And Jenny has so much to share with us today that I already suggested to her that I might bring her back because there's a lot to talk about. So, Jenny, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us about, the work you've been doing. You've been working in grief counseling, for many, many years. You also do a lot of work with students, young people, and of course, a new arena for you is the alpha-gal syndrome, grief work. So, without much more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you, Trish. First, I want to say thank you for letting me be on this beautiful show. Anytime that I am given the opportunity to talk about grief, loss, and trauma, I'm your girl. I'm just going to say it's something I'm very passionate about. I love the opportunity. I love having the conversations, and that's a big part of why I'm here today is spreading that awareness and educating people about different layers of grief and different kinds of grief. But I wanted to introduce kind of where I came from and background because I think that's relevant
Mhm.
People want to make sure you know what you're talking about, and that you're not just reading from a book per se. So, my first 8 years of my professional career, I worked inpatient psychiatric setting at a local hospital with all populations. So crisis care, acute intervention, loved it. But then I got the call to join hospice and transition from psychiatry into 15 years walking alongside people with terminal illnesses. Served as the bereavement coordinator there, more crisis intervention, sitting bedside, ICU work, a lot of community bereavement. And when that started to kind of grow, where I was doing more murders, house fires, heart attacks, car accidents, you name it, versus hospice related work, because everybody was coming to the resource for grief and loss, and that just happened to be me. Thankfully there's more than just me in our community now, but back then I was kind of your go-to person. And so because that caseload started really escalating, in 2019, we had two EF4 tornadoes that hit not 5 miles from where I'm sitting right now, and it killed 23 people in our community, several of which were elementary school students. So all of a sudden, then I'm really thrown into community trauma support and critical incident stress management. And that led me to 6 years ago this month, opening up my own private practice where I'm sitting today. This is Serenity Community Counseling, and started a contract with our local school system to be the school-based clinical therapist 3 days a week in a high school setting, and see anywhere from 6 to 8 kids a day and walk alongside them through grief and trauma. We've had 6 completed suicides at the high school that I work at in the last 7 years. So it is very near and dear to me. All right. And I don't say that lightly. Last June, I was bit by a tick. July, diagnosed with alpha gal syndrome. And we'll get into all of that with your next questioning. But I just needed to make sure you guys kind of got an understanding of where I'm coming from and some of that grief work.
Thank you, Jenny. Jenny, I have a quick question for you. What is your greatest reason for hope?
My greatest reason for hope? I'm not quite sure I
Mhm.
understand what you're asking.
Well, just in general, as given the work that you're doing and real life, um, including your, new diagnosis, what today is your greatest reason for hope?
Um, for me personally, hope for me is just thinking about um, a cure, a cure that will relieve a tremendous amount of unnecessary pain and suffering and angst and grief that people are experiencing, not just with alpha gal, but other tick related illnesses. For our at large population, hope in that creating platforms for people to find their way into a safe space where they can have their feelings validated,
Mm.
because especially with alpha gal, you'll hear time and time again, people have felt dismissed, unseen, unheard, like their grief doesn't count because it's not death related. So there's a lot of people that have now gravitated to different spaces on social media looking for hope, looking for that light in the darkness, per se. So they're not feeling like they're walking alone, but with people who are suffering or walking through this together.
Wow. You know, we probably should explain what alpha gal syndrome is and, which tick is the villain that we know of. I mean, there may be others. Um, so why don't we just start there?
Okay, so the alpha-gal syndrome is an illness that is caused by primarily the Lone Star tick. Um, the Lone Star tick is very much identifiable by a white dot in the center of its back. That's how I knew once I located mine on my body that that's what I was dealing with and looking for symptoms, which I was hoping were not going to arrive, and yet they did several weeks later. But it's an allergy. It's a sugar molecule. Your body just starts rejecting all mammal products. So when people hear alpha gal, it's fondly but not fondly referred to as the red meat allergy.
Mm.
I say fondly because that's the easiest way to explain it. You can no longer have red meat. You can no longer have mammal. So I'm now allergic to beef, pork, lamb, bison, deer, dairy products because that's of mammal.
Mm.
Um, and the list goes on. We can get into more details about that in a little bit, but unfondly, it's referred to as the red meat allergy because it's so much more than we can't just eat red meat. This is life changing. It's life altering, and not just for ourselves, but for our family members and our friends and the people that are around us. It's daily challenges. So um, it's spreading. We're finding that more and more people are developing or being diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome, and it's just mind-boggling how quickly those numbers are rising, um, and how much one tiny little bug can do to one's body makeup.
It is. And, even up here in northern Vermont, it seems to me that I am aware of a lot more people just this summer who, um, were bitten by a tick and now, have been working with, a tick-borne illness. And you know, it's it can be debilitating because you don't, we're in a remote rural area, so we're constantly in fields of grass and, woods and things like that. And if I remember correctly, Jenny, your story, you were fly fishing.
I was, and having the time of my life, and and did all the correct things. I had on the long sleeves, I had the hair up, I had the hat on, I had the spray, the pants, all of the things, and yet it still got me. And the thing about that Lone Star tick, though, and with alpha gal syndrome, is you could get bit by a Lone Star tick as well
Hmm.
and not develop the allergy. I think
Oh.
the last thing that I read about it was maybe something like 35% of people who are bitten by Lone Star tick actually develop alpha gal syndrome. So I got really lucky. I got really, really lucky to not only have gotten the Lone Star tick, but also to find that I was allergic to it and diagnosed.
Well, and if I remember correctly, you have had more than one experience with anaphylactic shock. And so again, taking it seriously, I mean, reading your book, I think again, everybody should read for a number of reasons. But, your journey of being an advocate for yourself because doctors, hospitals didn't really know what to do and didn't, again, were like, well, this is what I know, and you don't fit in there. So what you're saying couldn't possibly be happening.
Yeah, I consider myself fortunate in that I got a very quick diagnosis. And when you read or hear about stories of people who have alpha gal syndrome, 99% of the time, you're probably going to hear that they suffered for years or extensive periods of time before they were diagnosed with alpha gal syndrome because it was so rare or nobody had heard of
Mm.
it. When I was diagnosed last July, at that time it said 450,000 people across the country had alpha gal syndrome. That's a very small number when you consider the population, right?
Hmm.
That number is easily in the millions. It just continues to rise, and the reason for that, I believe, is that people are now getting diagnosed. People, because we're having conversations like this, people are hearing about alpha gal and they're saying, what is that? Each person you talk to, then now they're thinking, oh, I can't have steak again, or a big fat juicy cheeseburger, or drink a glass of milk if I get that. And they're filing it away. They're filing it away and saying, oh, tick, if I get bit by this tick. Because if I were to ask you what's the most prevalent tick-borne illness, or what's a tick-borne illness that you've heard of, what would we say? Is
Lyme.
Lyme disease, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's heard of alpha gal, but that's changing. And because it's changing, and because more doctors are becoming aware of it, then they now know to order that very specialized blood test. So simple. Go in, get some blood drawn, they send it off. A week later, you're getting your response,
Mm.
positive or negative. And if you're positive, I'm so sorry. Your life is now, your life is changing. But at least now you have answers and you can create a plan to work that plan.
Hmm.
So going back to your very first question to me about hope, now
Hmm.
people, because they're receiving their diagnosis, now they have hope that they can feel
Hmm.
better.
Hmm. Oh, good point. So, you know, what is it like to suddenly find yourself, navigating, the kind of ambiguous loss that you've been validating in clients for years?
Ooh. Uh, um, you know, that's a difficult question. I think about it a lot, actually, because sometimes I feel like I'm two different people. I'm wearing the clinical therapist hat, and I'm there and I'm present for people and I'm working with them through whatever it is that they're experiencing and going through. And at the same time, I'm still having to acknowledge and embrace my own feelings and emotions too. I can't compartmentalize them all the time. I have to um, I have to be an advocate for myself and give myself permission to grieve and to
Mm.
say that it's okay if I'm having a red light day or a yellow light day, because they're not all going to be green light days.
Mm.
And so obviously red is no good, no good, yucky, horrible. I'm not feeling it. Yellow, it's okay. I'm managing. Green light, it's been a good day. Um, so yeah, I think I had an epiphany when I was diagnosed and I started recognizing my own grief journey, walking through this with family and friends and physicians and community people at large. Um,
Mm.
and there just really wasn't anything out there that was addressing it online that I could find or in a book form, which is why I just started in real time channeling that energy, just writing about it because I knew it would help me. And I was
Hmm.
hoping that it would help other people in turn.
Well, one of the things that you've said, you've written about is the phrase, it's not like someone died. And you've written that saying that, it's one of the most damaging things we can say. So, certainly in, my work, um, when people get chronic disease or, that kind of thing, people say strange things. And but why do we rank grief this way? And what does it hierarchy cost us?
Well, the cost is more damage, right? If people are feeling dismissed or that their feelings don't matter, what happens is a retreat. They start to internalize, they feel silenced,
Mm,
they feel unseen, unheard, they shut down. And that can be extremely damaging.
mm,
So it's really important that we continue to provide spaces where people do feel like they have agency to share, to acknowledge that no, dang it, my my feelings are real. Like this is intense and this is hard, and you don't get to be dismissive of how I'm feeling, or you don't get to tell me that your grief is any different from mine. And in fact, when I used to do 2 community support groups a month, and I love, love, love support groups. But what I would always tell people from the very beginning is you're going to feel tempted to come in here and listen to other people's grief and loss and what they're going through. And you're going to think that this person's is worse than yours. Or if I threw my problems on the table, I'm going to be quick to pull mine back once I hear everybody else's. We can't do that. We can't rank
mm,
that because pain is pain and hurt is hurt, and everybody feels it. And everybody feels it differently. And so sharing it is much, much better than being made to feel like you have to carry it alone.
mm. Well, and something listening to you reminds me of, our work with end of life care is I've been witness to um, people, almost, just dismissing the agency of the person who is dying and, not, you know, um, not giving respect and name, excuse me, to them. So it's just like, oh, we're going to talk in front of this person who is dying, and we give them, that label. And, as far as even like, their pain is, you know, uh, is that real? They're dying. Is that imagined? Is it really that bad? That kind of thing. Um, so what have you seen is, the most common unnamed griefs that you see people dismissing? The losses that don't come with funerals, but hurt just as deeply.
Uh-huh. Well, I used to, when I worked in hospice, I used to work, I ran a grief camp for kids and teens for 15 years, and that camp was very specific in that they could only attend that camp if they had experienced a death-related loss of a person. And so because it was again very specialized. But with that said, the reason why I brought that up is because every year we would have a ton of people that would try to register for that grief camp because they had different types of grief that were just as impactful for them,
Mm,
but didn't meet that criteria for that hospice grief camp. And some of those things were like termination of parental rights, um,
mm,
or divorce, pet loss, um, loss of a job for adults, broken relationships, dysfunctional relationships, foster care placement, being separated from siblings. What if you had a family of 5 and they all had to go into different homes? Those are big things. Loss of autonomy. Right now, we're walking alongside my mother-in-law who has vascular dementia, end stages. So, watching those kind of losses start to pile up the grief of lack of mobility, lack of ability to feed oneself, memory loss, obviously. Um, those are just some big ones. I mean, that's a lot, but
mm.
those aren't funerals, but they are every bit as impactful.
So speaking of, kids, what is the difference, if there is one, between how adults think kids should grieve versus how kids actually grieve? You've said that kids don't need us to have all the answers. They need us to stop pretending that we do. But what does that look like in practice?
Um, One of my biggest pet peeves is when I hear adults say that, oh, kids are resilient, they can handle it. Like they don't really know what's going on. They don't need to be involved. They don't need to be included. Oh, they don't need to see this. Ah,
Mm,
um, what I always try to gently sit down and talk with them about is, first of all, I hear what you're saying. But what if we take a step back and look at it from a different perspective? And what if we checked in with the kids and asked them to be a part of this? Like if you're worried that they're going to be afraid of something, ask them what are they afraid of?
mm,
Encourage them to voice those fears so that we can address them and then let them be a part of things. It's when we take away their choices and we just assume that they're too young to understand or they don't know, they would be too hurt by it. That's where I see the most damage. I mean, I've seen people not include teenagers in, the active dying process of a loved one because they think it would be too hard for them. Well, guess what?
mm,
When I meet with that teenager and I have permission to work with them, they are filled with resentment and frustration and anger because they didn't get a choice. It was taken from them. So that's the biggest
mm.
thing for me.
Hmm. And Nadine, go ahead.
Jenny, do you think also that the reasons the adults don't want to include children is they don't know how to? They don't know how to respond to them. And that added weight of dealing with a loss themselves.
Yeah, good point, Nadine, because you're absolutely spot on. You're correct. There's not, look, death is uncomfortable. And it's not something that people are jumping up and down to talk about, which is why there's a big part of why I'm in the school systems a lot is because even our school counselors, they're going to be quick to refer out because they don't know what to say to kids or how to support them. And they can talk about self-esteem and divorce groups and bullying and anti-drugs, no, all day long, but death and dying
Yeah.
very uncomfortable. So with parents or grandparents, we have a lot of our grandparents that are raising their kids nowadays. So it's like second sets of parents. It's all about sitting down and having a conversation. So if I have the opportunity to do that and meet with the parents first and hear their concerns, then we can invite the children in. And I think that's really the best way to go about and do that. Because we make too many assumptions about what kids we think that they don't know or that they don't understand, when in
Mm,
reality, they know a heck of a lot more than we give them credit for.
hmm. Thank you for that question, Nadine. And so that brings me to, um, permission to grieve. If someone listening is minimizing their own loss because at least I have my health, or at least no one died, what would you say to them? How do we teach people, especially young people, to honor their losses without comparison or ranking?
Yeah, I guess that goes back to giving permission to vocalize and to grieve openly. In the support group that I started online, the Alpha Gal Grief Girl page, initially when it first started, and we're not even 3 months in yet, but and growing, it's just rapidly growing. I had a lot of people that reached out to me privately and said things like, I want to post anonymously because I don't feel comfortable sharing my feelings. I don't want anybody to see them. I don't want my friends and family to know this is what I'm thinking and this is how I'm feeling. So by all means, do that. I just would prefer that you get in here and speak and have a platform versus not speak and not have that platform at all. And what I'm seeing is that once people recognize that they have a safe space to do that, then they're coming back around and saying, how do I turn off this anonymous button? I feel safe here. I want to be able to share with other people. And that is incredible that we're able to do something like that. There's a lot of myths that surround our mental health and feelings. The word strong is a pet peeve of mine. It depends on the way that we use it. But people are taught from the time they're T90 that we got to just pick up our big boy or big girl pants and we got to suck it up and we just got to deal. Nobody wants to hear about your problems. Oh, that's attention seeking. You should not talk about that. Um, the list goes on and on as to why people choose to or are made to feel like they have to shut it down. And my hope in providing that Facebook support page is that people are going to feel more emboldened to share. And in sharing, they feel stronger and they feel more
Mm,
capable of acknowledging their feelings and knowing that they're not alone, which is going to help in the healing process.
mm. Yeah. Certainly in end of life work, we find that, isolation can be such a default, right? That we withdraw, whether we are the special person who is actively dying, or, the primary caregiver, or distant family. It's what we try to do, certainly, I have several colleagues with me on this, interview who are also end of life doulas. And, we, our passion is to meet people where they are. And that
Mhm.
takes a lot of energy, a lot of thought, a lot of intentionality. And for me, in my experience, is it's been easier for me to meet the person who's dying where they are, but the family, the caregivers, that dynamic is so hard. And so reminding them by modeling and, sometimes using words that it's important to honor our person by meeting them where they are, whether you agree with them or not. It's, you know, their decision and it's worthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that used to be one of my biggest challenges also, especially in the hospice setting, is the dying with dignity for
Mhm.
the patient, meeting them where they're at, which you've talked about. But acknowledging the grief that the family members were going through as well and helping them process
Mm,
their emotions and feelings so that they could then in turn be present for their loved one and giving their loved one permission to share what it is that they were feeling. Because a lot of
mm,
times, I don't know if you've ever read Being Mortal by Atul
mhm,
Gawande,
mhm,
but he talks about, how many times that people in end of life experiences and terminal illnesses feel like they have to do things for their loved ones instead of for themselves.
mhm,
They feel like they have to eat because there's here, you got to eat this, you got to keep your strength up, you got to, or here, drink this, you need to stay hydrated, where it actually makes them feel very sick and or can be dangerous for them. So having the conversations from the get-go about what their end of life experience, with how they envision it, um, to the best of their ability and how they want to approach some of those difficult things at their ending can really make the ending more beautiful if the family is present and on board and on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I am so glad you're here. And I'm so glad you're available, at least to me, to reach out and, share and ask questions. I'm going to open it up to everybody else to, have questions. Pastor Larry, you've been doing a lot of nodding and writing. Do you have any questions for Jenny?
Well, hi, Jenny.
Hi.
So you're in Texas?
No, I'm in Alabama in case you couldn't hear my.
Alabama, Bama, Bama. I have a friend that's
Auburn.
down there, and he told me it's 30 degrees.
Oh, it's freezing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
No, I just jotted a few things down that resonated with me. Um, One of them was I'm a part of a support group that repeats often, especially when there's new ones. Identify, don't compare.
Mhm.
Identify, don't compare. Once you start comparing it, yeah, it just doesn't work. And I don't know if you remember, Patricia, the state police here had a trauma specialist. Her first name was Fran. Do you remember her? This was years ago.
No, I don't recall at this point.
Yeah. So I was at a conference that she was doing, and she was talking about grief and and I said, my wife Sally cried a whole lot more over the loss of one of our dogs than she did her own dad.
And I love my.
And she loved her dad. I mean, they had a real tight relationship. And I said, what's that all about? She said, it's the degree of investment. Of course, Sally left England when she was very young and wasn't with the family wasn't there. But that dog was with her every day. And so to the degree of investment from your life, to that degree will be the depth of grief. And that made sense to me. So it all depends on your life investment, how much you're going to grieve that loss. But Nadine really hit the nail on the head. People just don't know. They do what they do because they do not know what they do, you know.
Right.
And I'm uniquely positioned, and several of us to make sure that people do know and understand what's going on and how to deal with it. And
Yeah.
and so this has been great, Jenny. Is that you like Jenny or Jennifer? Jenny?
No,
Jen?
don't. Oh, the only person that calls me Jennifer is my mom when I'm in trouble. So
Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank
So
you. I'm going to turn
yeah,
it
no,
over to
it was really
Lindsay.
good hearing you and thank you for all you're doing. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Lindsay. I see you're on camera. Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to send some gratitude to Jenny for having this conversation and letting people in the tick-borne illness community know that loss is loss. That's how I ended up in end-of-life care. I couldn't continue to conduct choirs, and making music at the bedside was meaningful. And I have Lyme and Bartonella and Babesia. And I haven't really looked back so much because sometimes it's easier not to look back. But I so appreciate now the opportunity to hear from somebody else who's walked through that same fire, that grief is grief and loss is loss. And so I appreciate the opportunity to reprocess and rethink this. And I think it's going to help enrich how I can be present for people and support their grief. So thank you so much for your work.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I'm so sorry that you're walking the journey too. And I think all of us tend to say that to one another. It's like, oh, welcome to the club that nobody wants to join. Because we don't. But while we're here, then we might as well acknowledge things like denial and bargaining and acceptance and anger. I wrote a heck of a lot about anger, and working towards acceptance. And that's still a process for me. I mean, I'm still on this journey. And the thing about grief is once you're on the journey, you're always on the journey. It just changes.
Yeah.
It's not as sharp as it was at the very beginning. It does get softer, but with that said, there's still sharp moments that come in from time to time,
Mhm.
especially if I come across a new item that I realized, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to have a Cadbury chocolate egg again because they're already out on the shelves now, or a Little Debbie's Christmas tree cake, and you know. Little things. I'm talking about food, but there's so much more beyond that. Yeah, acceptance, working towards that, I think is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah.
So, you wrote in your book, and Lindsay, I need to send you the link to it. The mind body journey with Alpha Gal, in your book, Grief and
Mm,
Alpha Gal, you talk about the mind and body connection using stages of grief as a framework.
mm,
Can you walk me through that journey? Where did you get stuck and what surprised you?
mm. I think the very beginning, and here's the thing that we all know as grief specialists, so apologies to those who aren't, but you there are stages of grief, but we don't all experience all the stages, and we don't all experience them in any particular order, right? Um, so for me and for a lot of people, as I'm reading their responses as they reach out to me, is that initial stage was denial. This can't be real. This first symptom that I had post tick bite is like I was explaining it away as a multitude of other things. Oh, it could be food poisoning. Oh, I just got into something, or it's detergent. Why I'm breaking out into full body hives. I didn't want to accept that. So there's the denial. Then there's the shock when I get the phone call that the test came back positive. This cannot be real. And then where do I go from here? Because like many people, my physician, I love him. Just in case he ever watches this, I love him. But he didn't know about it. He all I got in was a voicemail saying, "You're positive. Unfortunately, that means you can't eat red meat." And just the voicemail just listed, no beef, no pork, didn't say anything about dairy, didn't say anything about medication changes, everyday product changes, like shampoo and toothpaste and deodorants and all of that kind of stuff that we're now all having to consider, or a majority of us are. So then I went into some more denial, some bargaining, like, well, maybe it's a false positive. I'm going to go ahead and try this anyways and see what happens. Vomiting, diarrhea, running to the bathroom, stomach cramps, all those unpleasant things. And then anger. Whoo, was I angry because I couldn't get anybody to hear me. I mean, the people that heard me, family members, very close family members, even then, they still didn't completely understand and are still trying to wrap their mind around things. But that anger is fueled by hurt, pain, and sadness. So there was a lot of hurt from the dismissiveness, a lot of physical pain, had joint pain. I still have a tremendous amount of brain fog. I stumble over my words. And I just kind of look at people like, just hang in there with me. I'm going through a brain fog moment. Um, Trying to understand what was happening to my body, my brain, which is part of my body, but still all of those things led to a lot of the anger. And then trying to walk into the space of accepting that, okay, this is what I have. What's my plan of action? how am I going to work this plan? And then most importantly, how am I going to invite people into my plan? Because in order for this to be successful for me to be the healthiest that I can be, I need my advocates. I need my safe people around me. Um, so that if there's things I'm overlooking, they're like my backup, right? They're able to ask questions, or in both cases, when I went into anaphylaxis, I had to have people who were able to explain to the paramedics and the EMS teams that arrived what was happening. Because the first time they had never heard of it. The second time I was in another country, they had never heard of it. And people are dying from alpha gal. People have died from alpha gal. So this is a long answer to your question, but still working on coping and finding new ways to cope, which is why I'm pouring a lot of energy into walking alongside others and helping bring hope to them to know that they can beat this, because I see a lot of despair on my page. I see a lot of people who are also surrounded by family members that don't buy into what they're experiencing. They don't support them. They continue to, in their household, eat mammal products in front of them, have it on the shelves in the refrigerator, cooking it. I have fume reactions. That's not going to fly in my household. And luckily, I don't have to deal with that. So I'm lucky in that regard. But a lot of people, their family and friends are not supportive of their alpha gal, and so they have additional layers of grief that make it complicated. I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Yeah, I
There you
forgot. Um, so, right now, um, all the folks that are here, with us in this conversation and on the screen are in some shape or form community educators. And I feel very strongly and very deeply that, a lot of the work that we do in end of life care and in death care is people don't know. People don't know they have choices. They just don't have the information. So, on that note, one of the things, and I brought this up to you the other day, Jenny, one of the things that won't leave my mind is when you talked about porcupine gel being in products. And A, what? B, that, you can have a reaction to that.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is when the devastating news for me was I found out that candy corn has porcupine gelatin in it, or gelatin of any kind. So much of our food is filled with unnecessary fillers. And for alpha gal people in particular, some of those familiar words now are things like gelatin and lanolin and glycerin and vitamin D3. I can't have Cheerios for Pete's sake. Most of our cereals have that vitamin D3, which is straight up mammal. So if I were to have some of those things, if I ingest it, I am running the risk of going into anaphylaxis. So I wear bracelets on both wrists, medical bracelets. I want to make darn sure after that first time that people know more about what exactly I have, so at least they can Google it if they don't know. But yeah, there's just so much out there. Oh, and cross contamination. That's another grief, not being able to go out to restaurants readily or with ease. A lot of people don't go at all because of fear, because you're risking your life by trusting somebody else to make sure they're preparing the food for you, or you're not getting that contamination from other mammal products. Because speaking of dismissiveness, when I was first diagnosed, people would say to me, "Oh, well, you just can't have beef. You can still go to McDonald's and you can order a French fries and chicken nuggets and blah, blah, blah. But all of that is fried in beef tallow. So even people who think that they are eating, they're not eating, meat, they're still getting that beef flavoring and seasoning in their potatoes and in their food. So that could send me straight to the ER and or kill me. So not to be dramatic, but that is reality. That's our reality that we're looking at. So that fear creates additional losses, which paralyze people and add more layers of grief.
Wow. Oh, and, yes, I'm going to come to you, Pastor Larry, just to remind all of us, not that we do, because as community educators, we really do know that, we try to use different ways to, educate people about information and choices. Nadine has been a spearhead for our death cafes in a local town, which have been amazing for people to feel that they're in a safe space with tea and cookies and be able to listen and then riff off of somebody else and say, oh, and this is what I'm thinking about, or this is my experience. There's a lot of power in that. And so I hope that we can continue to amplify, what we've been talking about here, on grief, on youth, on, certainly on alpha gal and other, not named griefs, that kind of thing. So we're going to wrap it up with a question from Pastor Larry.
Yes, one that I'm very concerned about. So I'm a fly fisher myself. We have some of the finest fly fishing in the world here. Been doing it for years. And my concern is, are you able to do a little fly fishing?
I am.
All right.
I'm not gonna let it, Pastor Larry, I'm not gonna let it paralyze me because the
Yeah.
moment that we stop living, then the tick wins. The disease or the illness, it's not a disease, an illness wins. And
Yeah.
so yes, I have to think about it. But I mean I could get bit by a tick walking out the door. I could have a piano fall out of the sky and land on my
Yeah.
head. I mean, so that's not it's a lot easier said than done. A lot of people are not able to reach that type of mind frame. But I posted in my on my that Facebook page, Alpha Gal Grief Girl, the book by Mitch Albom called Twice. And in that book, it was talking about if you had a chance to go back and do something over, would you? And so I presented that in that space because a lot of people talk about the before, before the tick bite. And if I could go back and change it, I'd do da 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 da. And I let people process that for a couple days. And then I went back to it and I told them, I said, in full transparency, and I'm being completely honest when I say I would not change that because that day standing in that river fly fishing was one of the most amazing, soul filling days that I experienced in my life thus far. And I'm going to chase it. I'm going to chase it and try to find it again. And I'm going fly fishing next month.
Hallelujah. You've made my day.
Woohoo!
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for that encouragement too, because last summer, because we were finding different ticks on me, I found myself in the situation of I can't walk in the fields anymore. I can't walk the dog anymore. And it was like, all right, snap out of it. Like you said, I mean, it could be anything at all, that could happen. And I was reminded too that, looking, Jenny, I don't know if you feel this way, but looking in the past is like depression, and looking in the future can be anxiety. So that, just reinforces the present.
It's true. I agree.
Well, I'm going to let you go. I know you've got, a full schedule that you made time for us. I am just incredibly grateful. Thank you for this. And I do, in listening to our conversation today, I do realize that I would love to have you back, to help us, understand grief in youth more, because we work with families, but it's not, without, and in my, experience without enough experience or expertise, certainly in youth and the difference,
Yeah.
in grief and how to honor.
You
So
bet. You're more than happy to.
brilliant. Thank you. And I'm so excited you're going fishing, fly fishing. Thank you
Thank
All
for
right.
being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.